Getting ready to do some work to the old Javelin. We got the aluminum 3-row radiator installed and it was getting the job done, but it was struggling. So we're going to step it up to a 4-row radiator. It probably would have been okay with some better shrouding. With this factory shroud, there's a huge gap in here and there's plenty of places for the air to not go through the radiator. Here's a look at our 4-row radiator. It's about 1/2 inch thicker. We went into some fitment issues. And I got the optional fan shroud set up. I like this shroud because it's a direct bolt on and you don't have to hack the car up at all. And it actually fits on there excellent. I found it in 10 inch and 12 inch and I went with the 12. Bigger is better, right? Here's one of the fans it came with. It's just a cheapo fan. You can see it has a flat spot so you can fit them both in there. We'll see how it works. I'm going to wire up the fans with one of these Durali relay kits and see how it works. Let's get the party started here. We flushed out the motor in the old brass radiator before we put this one in. And then after this one was installed, we flushed it out again and then added the antifreeze. I'll do the same thing for that new radiator. Seemed like we got some crap out of this one when we flushed it. Here's my thermostatic switch out of this kit. This is a 180 on, 165 off. Got to keep it above the thermostat. And this is kind of neat. They give you a fitting and it just screws in there. And then at a later date you could change it without even draining your coolant. There's my fitting installed. I had to move the water temperature gauge one over and eliminate the factory one for the gauge. I'm getting ready to get rid of this fan here. This is a flex fan. I don't know if it's original or not, and I of course don't have the right bolt, so you go to the hardware store and get a small fine thread bolt like that. Grade 8 of course. Here she is bolted down, nothing like a trip to the hardware store to slow the project down. Here's a look at this fan. I was kind of studying the rivets on it, and I don't recall seeing rivets like this on like a Flexolite fan. It fits the spacer perfectly also. If anybody can tell me if this is original or not, please comment on the video. Here I'm getting ready to mount these fans. They came with these tabs. Slide right in here. And I'm just using a button head coming up from the back side. Some washers and a locking nut. I use this rib as a center line of the fan. And I drew a center line across the shroud. And using a square, I came down off of that rib. You can see these fans are directional, they're pullers. So I'm going to wire it up now and test the polarity. Here I've connected the two fans. I'm just going to have them both come on at once. And I've soldered some 12 gauge wire on there. You can see I heat shrinked them there. I'm going to put one big piece of heat shrink over the whole works to clean up the appearance. Couple zip ties and a little bit of armoring, and here's what I got. So there's the arrow. I use this old junk battery charger for doing stuff like this, and I'm just going to touch it on there and see if I got to go in the right direction, with this red being a positive. I was getting ready to flush the radiator before I mounted the fans in there. So after placing the radiator in here, I noticed that a big gap in front and the bottom's hitting. So I'm clearly going to have to make spacers to bring this more towards the back of the car. And once I do that, this original shroud should fit in there. The only hope is that the fans fit in there in front of that pulley and water pump. I'm making my spacers here. I'm pretty much a complete amateur when it comes to machining, so I stayed away from capturing any footage of it. For all I know, I'm at the wrong speed, but this aluminum seems to machine pretty easy. Put a chamfer on it there. I got my parting tool kind of even with the edge here. I'm going to preload this prick against the carriage so I can measure 1/2 inch in to try to make my spacers somewhat the same thickness. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Close enough. Probably supposed to lock my carriage here, but I'm not really getting any push off. And I'm running the power feed there. So the ordeal of running the lathe is over. I'm sure someone will comment that it was doing something wrong there, but that's okay. That's how you learn. And there's my perfectly fitting spacer. My 1/2 inch spacers didn't cut it, so to make a whole other set of 5/8 inch spacers. I was just touching on one corner and I didn't really want to ding the car, so I figured I'd just make some thicker spacers. Well, it's mounted. You can see we have plenty of clearance between that front pulley and the fans. But spacing out like this kind of made a little gap that the air can pass through. So I'll probably end up just taping that gap with some like black tape. This filler piece didn't fit in before. And now it's spaced out. It fits pretty similar to how it fit originally. We're going to have a listen to these fans now. Almost sounds like an air raid's going on or something. I'm getting ready to wire this thing, and I studied Durali's instructions and I looked at some other instructions off the internet, and I decided to go with the ground switch type setup. I got my meter set on ohms just so you can see continuity, but these two fatties are going to be the supply to the fan. Basically this will be constant 12 volt hot, and then when the relay gets activated it'll feed this red one, which will feed the fans. So I got my ohm meter on these two, and you can see there's no connection there. But when I activate the switch by grounding it, hold on there better, makes a connection. And that way I'll just have to run a single wire into the cab to a switch and then ground the other end if I want to have a manual on. Got my trusty solder gun here, and I got the female spade pointed upwards so the solder doesn't fill the thing up. And tin the tip there. Once I get a little bit on it, it helps with the heat transfer. Here I'm sliding a piece of heat shrink over a female spade. Should help prevent any false triggers. It's quite a bit later, and I got it wired up for the most part. Here's my thermostatic switch. When this activates, it's going to ground that relay, turn it on, and power will be provided to the fans. The power was pulled off the front side of this solenoid, and the switched ignition was pulled off the solenoid also. I got a DC amp clamp on that power wire for the fans, and we'll fire it up here. You'll see an inrush, and then you'll see what amperage they run at. So you saw an inrush of over 20 amps there, and then it likes to run at about 14. So here's a ground wire I spliced in, and this will override my thermostatic switch if I want to turn the fans on manually in the cab. And you can see when I ground it, starts up the fans.
So he's upgraded to the Big Daddy. This is like 4 rows of cooling tubes, bigger tank. Modifications had to be made. He's got a shroud in the back with two, twin fans in the back that go all the way around the whole radiator, so the air pulling through is really strong. You can feel your hands in front of it, and it's drawing a ton of air through it. Spacers had to be made on his lathe to even space it, and the regular fan was taken off, so there was enough room for it to fit. The original panel fit. It was very quality made. So now all he's got to do is flush it out and we'll be good to go. Then he'll check the radiator and see how she runs in hot traffic.
We're going to go ahead and flush this new radiator and see if anything comes out of it.
He's doing this just to be on the safe side. During the production of it, you could have a little blow through or something like that. All it takes is a little piece of metal to go through the water pump or something and wreck it. So he's flushing it out, even though it's brand new. And after a while, you'll see water come gushing out of here. So just get it, fresh water, rinse it out, and then he'll put the antifreeze back in.
If anybody's wondering how high up this radiator sits, it's probably hard to see, but that cap is below the level of where the Y duct would go. So the height is pretty good on it. Here you can hear it running by the thermostatic switch. And I'm finding she's kicking off a little early. We'll see about what temperature she shuts down at. 175 according to that. So I might try the 165 on, 145 off switch and see if that works a little better to my liking. Right behind the distributor there is a sending unit for my gauge, and it's almost looking like my gauge is maybe a little bit off. Hard to say at this point. It is kind of a cheapo gauge. Here the manual override switch is on. Some pretty good air. I'll probably have some more on this later after we do some street testing, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching.